everybody, and welcome to Blue Lady Couture, and a very warm welcome if you are joining me for the Costube Symposium 2021, or COSY. This video is going to be a sew-along where I'm going to take you through making a summery Victorian bustle skirt with a bit of a steampunk twist to it. So at time of filming next Saturday, I am going to a steampunk summer picnic with our local steampunk society, and it will be the first steampunk event certainly that I have attended in well over a year. It will also be my birthday weekend, so what better reason is there than for me to make a pretty new bustly skirt for myself. Now, if you are a follower of my channel already, you may actually recognise this jacket that I have here. This is a jacket that I made in the autumn or the fall of last year to go with another outfit, and you'll be able to watch the video of that. I'll put the link in the description down below. But at the time of making it, I knew that I would potentially want to be able to rewear the jacket with lots of different outfits. So I kept it plain and simple. It doesn't have any trim on it. But it has a really lovely Victorian shape with this lovely peplum at the back and the beautiful shaping on the bodice panels, because I knew that I potentially want to wear it to a steampunk event the following year, this year, and I would want to make a lovely new bustle skirt to go with it. So originally I was going to keep this quite simple and make quite a simple bustle skirt, one of my skirts from my classic collection that I sell in my shop, Blue Lady Couture. And I ordered 3 meters of fabric to make the skirt, which is this lovely sky blue taffeta. It's a slightly different shade of blue to the ice blue that I used on the jacket, but it's still in the nice cooler shades of blue, so I think they will work very well together. So yeah, so I ordered 3 meters of taffeta from my supplier, but when it arrived, they had actually sent me an extra meter. They said that there was a fault somewhere in the 3 meters that I had ordered, so they sent me an extra meter. I have been over and over this fabric. I really can't see any major fault with it. There's a very tiny little kind of where there's a little loop where when it's been woven, it looks like it's missed a few stitches. But other than that, I can't see any major faults on here at all. So that means I've got 4 meters of fabric to play with, which suddenly opened up a whole world of possibilities, because you can do a lot with 4 meters of fabric. So yeah, it kind of threw me a bit of a curveball, and I was like, well, I don't really want to waste this extra meter. So I decided to put it to a poll on my Facebook and my Instagram, and my followers, well, I gave you 3 options: a simple option, a middling option, and a more complicated option, because I only have today to do this. I have one day. Today is Saturday. I think it's coming up to about 9 AM in the morning. So yeah, so I'm getting started super early on this because I only have today to do this, and it's got to be done for next Saturday, and I really don't have time to work on it during the week after today. It's back to normal work day, which is why I'm doing this on a Saturday. So yeah, so I gave my followers 3 options to choose from, and you unanimously voted for the more complicated option. Of course you did. And I think even those of you who said, well, if time's a bit tight, do option number 1, the simple option, but would really love you to make the really complicated option. Thanks, guys. I mean, I'll take it as a compliment that you think I can get this done in a day. I do appreciate that. So yeah, so what the heck, let's give it a go. I don't know if I'm going to get this done in a day. I should be able to. If it was completely out of the question, I wouldn't have actually included it as an option. But yeah, let's give it a go, shall we? So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to be making a variation of the beautiful cage style bustle skirts that are worn by the character of Maria Merriweather in the film Secret of Moonacre. Now, I've spoken about this before on my channel. I did a top steampunk movie costume film review video a few weeks ago, which I will link in here somewhere, up here and down below. So you can go check that out. But yeah, essentially I adore the costumes in this movie. I just think they're so fun and they're so different, but still have that real core Victoriana feel to them. So over the years I have actually made several variations of these bustle skirts for myself. I've also done a cosplay recreation of the blue dress that's inspiring this for a client, and I'll pop some pictures in here for you now, hopefully. Yeah, so I've done variations of these before, so I'm not completely unfamiliar with the style or doing something completely new, which hopefully is why I'll be able to get it done in a day for you today if I stop waffling and actually crack on and make this skirt. Okay, so this skirt is basically just made from two panel pieces. There's the large front panel piece which will get pleated onto the waistband, and then there's the narrower section at the back which will have all the more complicated structured tiers on it. So I start out by measuring the length, so this might be slightly off camera but you'll see in a minute. So my waist to floor length, and then I take an inch off that length, so it's obviously not actually brushing the floor, it will just skim over the tops of my toes, and I did that measurement while wearing the shoes that I'm going to wear as well. Yeah, so I shortened my waist to floor length by an inch at the centre front, and then I add on 2 inches for the turn up for the hem. Then on the other side, so that was done on the fold of the fabric where I did the centre front. Oh, I should point out, I'm so used to just doing this off the bat that I forgot to mention. I also add on a 1/2 inch, that gives me my seam allowance to stitch into the waistband. So yeah, so on the back seam, I lengthen the hem length, or the waist to floor length, a little bit. So obviously I'm now using the overall measurement that I used for the front, the centre front as my starting point, which is now 43 inches. I'm going to add on another couple of inches, and then I just draw in that line. And then I always just put a mark in, so I know I put an F for front, so I know that what that corner is. So it's a very subtle difference in, you know, the curve is very slight, so sometimes it's very easy to get confused between the straight edge on this end and the curved edge on that end. So I like to mark that so I know which is what when you've got it all bundled up together on your lap in front of the sewing machine. Yeah, you're bound to sew the wrong edge. Right, so that was the scary bit. Cutting time. They're going back now. We are committed. And then one last thing I like to do when cutting out these panels, particularly with this taffeta, is I just take this fluffy selvage off, and then I will overlock this edge, because this is just a nightmare to wear with. This just gets clogged up, and if you try and run that through your overlocker, that's just going to clog your overlocker up and blunt your blade. So I always just trim that off. Don't cut through your tape measure, that would be bad. So again, with the back panel, I'm not going to use a pattern for this. It's going to be a very simple trapezoid shape. That's right, isn't it? Trapezoid shape, yeah. So basically it's going to be narrow at the top, and it's going to flare out slightly towards the hem. So this here is the curved edge that I've just cut, which creates the bottom of the other panel, the front panel. So I'm using that as what would be the hemline of the back panel. So I'm going to cut this to be 20 inches at the hem. So I'm marking 10 inches here, and then if needs be I can narrow that a little bit. That might be a little bit wide for me, so I'm quite petite. but I'd rather make it a fraction too wide. I can always trim a bit off the panel if it needs to be once I kind of start putting this together. So yeah, so 10 inches at the hem. Then I know that this the seam that's going to attach to the front panel is going to be 45 inches long, plus the ½ inch for my seam allowance into the waistband. As I say, the top of this panel only needs to be 6 inches, so that's 3 inches again, plus seam allowance of ½ inch. I mean, look at that. Can you see that? Yeah, I just love it when you get fabric from suppliers and they've just cut it off and I don't know. Do they know what a straight line is? So yeah, always straighten up your edges before you cut. Alright, so now I'm going to measure out the pleats. So the way I do my pleats for my Victorian skirts is I like to keep things simple. I normally allow to do a full circumference when I do my Victorian skirts, which uses 2 panels, the full width of this fabric in normal circumstances. I essentially double that width for when I do pleated ruffle hems. So that means if I have a metre of fabric allowed to create the ruffles, I can get 4 pieces 25 centimetres long. So this is where I've just cut out the back skirt panel. That measures to 84 centimetres. So that means I can get 3 25 centimetre ruffle widths out of this, which will take me to 75, and then that gives me, well, just under 9 centimetres, which is almost 4 inches, which will actually be perfect for creating my waistband because I've not cut my waistband yet. So I make the waistband simply by cutting off a strip across the width of the fabric. Normally I do 10 centimetres, 4 inches, but on this occasion, because of this narrow section here and to save wasting fabric, this is 9 centimetres, so I'm not going to worry about a centimetre difference on the waistband. Then for the waistband I take my waist measurement and I add 3 inches, which gives me ½ inch ease, an overlap for the placket, and my seam allowance on each end as well. One waistband, and then from the leftover scraps I cut the placket, which is 8 inches. So normally when I make a skirt like this, I would put the ruffle on. I'm having to think about this now. It's been a long while since I've done one of these skirts, so I'm just trying to think whether I normally put the ruffle on right at the very end or whether I essentially ruffle the individual panels and then I just join. Essentially the very back panel on the skirt, I've got to kind of construct that kind of all separately because it's easier to get it through the sewing machine if I haven't got the front panel and all that volume of fabric getting in the way. So yeah, so I'm just thinking whether I'm going to do, I think I'm going to make it so that I apply the ruffles to the front panel, then overlock kind of the front panel, so that is kind of prepped and ready, and then I can make the back panel with all the structures on it and add the ruffle onto the hem of that at the back, and then essentially I just need to join up the side seams and then turn up the hem, in theory. I know normally in Victorian costume the ruffle always gets put on last at the end, so it can easily be taken off and can be changed, you know, if it gets damaged or dirty. On this occasion I'm going to do it slightly differently, I think. Sure, that's how I normally do it. I may regret this decision in a little while. We shall see. So of course normally when I change the thread colours on my overlocker, I tie on the new colours and just change the needle thread, because that is the easiest way to do it. And in theory it should, if you get the knots just right, nice and small, it should just follow through nicely. But no, not today. Today it's decided to drop the stitch for whatever reason. Now I've got to fiddle about with it. And you can guarantee it will always do that when you're working to a tight deadline. Every time. Okay, so I have created my long length of ruffly pleated piece, which I am now going to pleat up. So what I've done is, if you remember I said I was going to use 2 widths of the fabric to create this pleat, but what I've done is one of the pieces I've cut in half and attached to either end of the piece, which is going to go in the centre front, just so that this seam, if it does happen to show, kind of depending on where the pleats fall, it just means it's definitely not going to be right at the centre front. It will be kind of offset to one side. Hopefully it will get kind of hidden in the pleats, just sometimes you just don't know quite where it's going to end up. So I did that. I overlocked each edge. If I flip it over, so I've overlocked each edge. I've turned up a narrow hem, which will be the bottom, and this slightly wider hem, which is going to be the top, and this will get caught down under the decorative piece that I would put on the front. And then it just means, I put a couple of pleats in there just so you can see, it just means that this, it will be stitched down kind of slightly lower here, and it just means that this top piece, which can move and might sort of fold over, it just means that the overlocking kind of edge isn't going to show at all. That'll be caught down nice and neatly into the anchoring stitch. Pleating is kind of like witchcraft. I'm hoping this will work out. If I've done my maths correct, it should do, because this is what I normally do for my my pleated ruffles on these skirts. So I know that 2 widths pleated to the allowance that my handy quality piece of cardboard guide is set to. I know that should just about fit nicely on the width of fabric that I have for the skirt panel. So yeah, so this is a nice quality piece of cardboard. This is cut to 6 centimeters or 2.5 inches at this end, and that is essentially what I use to guide my pleating. It's one of these things, when getting started is, like, how do I start this again? But once you get going, you just kind of get into the rhythm and it just works really nicely. So I use the tool just to fold under. It should be, I do kind of do this a little bit by eye. I'm not a super precise pleater by any means. So you want about 1 inch pleat on there, so it's 2 inches of fabric into that pleat. And then I put a pin. So using my guide, I line up with the edge of that last pleat crease, and again, which says, to get the little neck right off this. Fold it under. obviously if you wanted to do a lot nicer, a lot tighter kind of close together pleats, obviously you need more fabric for that. I just find that this pleat just works nicely with the fabric economy. As I say, I've worked out that I can just use a metre of extra fabric to get this pleated effect around the hem of my skirts. I'm just quickly roughly checking that the width I've pleated up is going to be enough to fit in there nicely. It's a fraction over, but obviously I can just chop that edge off once that's pinned in place. So what I need to do is, because obviously I need to remember I've not hemmed this yet. Stop sliding. So I need to allow 2 inches for the hem. So I'm going to mark a line 10.5 centimetres up. So you can base the pleats in place first, you can press them in place first. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to press these quite yet. Probably will, but I'm going to just leave them sort of soft for now. That just makes, if I do need to make any adjustments when I get to the other end, I can potentially do that. I'm being a little bit lazy and I'm just going to stitch this straight on, and I'm actually going to make a slightly contrast colour band out of a bias strip to just, again, so it's not just stitched in place, it just makes it a little bit more decorative. I literally just paused filming so I could go to the loo, and while I was in the loo, the red arrows just like flew over our house. And I'm like, I want to film this because this would just be like a little fun thing to end the vlog. Woo, red arrows! Who, if you don't know, are the UK's top aerobatic flying display team. You have probably heard of them if you're not in the UK as well. They do tour all over the world. But yeah, obviously they are based not very far away from us, and they very, very often practice in the skies above our house, which happened to be today, and I couldn't film it. Okay, so to make the bias binding, I'm using a leftover piece of the ice blue, which is the same fabric that the jacket's made out of. So I really want to introduce some of that colour into the lower skirt. I think by adding it as the kind of just a little bit in the bias binding detail and some of the kind of decorative ribbon sort of tails in the back, I think will be quite pretty. So to create bias binding, I take a piece of fabric, I kind of fold it crossways to create a diagonal across the grain, which is your bias, and then for this one, what width do I want? So yeah, I'm going to make 18mm bias binding using my bias binding tool. So for that I need to cut 3cm or 30mm strips. So mark those off. Okay, so I've just pinned the skirt onto the mannequin now, and you can see the hem is all stitched in place with the decorative band around it. The hem and the ruffle even, also the hem's not quite finished yet. I'll do that at the end when the back panel is attached, but I've just pinned it on the mannequin just so you can see where we're at. That is essentially the front panel done. Next stage is to work on the back panel and build the sort of structured pagoda tier pieces in, which will take a little bit more work, but I'm going to break for lunch now, and it's just coming up 12. It's probably taken me a bit longer than I thought it would to do this morning, to be honest, but I don't know how much time I spent really sort of faffing around, setting up the camera, talking to the camera, doing the introduction things this morning. So yeah, I probably got started a little after 9 o'clock, half 9ish maybe. But yeah, it's not going too bad, so fingers crossed if I can crack on this afternoon, we will get this done. Oh gosh, it's so hot and sticky here today. It's supposed to be even hotter tomorrow. Woohoo! So I apologise, I've had to open the window because it's just so stuffy in here because I've got the door shut because obviously I'm filming. So you'll probably hear noises, so I do apologise if you hear noises. Right, so I have had a bit of lunch and a bit of a break. We are on, what is it? It's a little after 1 now. So I've got less than 3 hours now really to try and get this done. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but we're going to crack on and see how far we get. So I think I showed you, if the lighting's okay on that bit of footage, you would have seen that I have pinned the skirt on the mannequin rather, just so you can see it's starting to take shape. Obviously we've got the gap at the back because the next piece I'm going to work on is the back panel. So yeah, let's crack on with that, shall we? Right, so I'm going to start figuring out the tiers for the pagoda sections. I'm going to start with the bottom tier because I know that it's got to line up with this section here, which I know is 10.5 inches. The top of that ruffle is 10.5 inches from the hem, so that is my guide point, my starting point. And then we can work our way up from there. So I have a piece of calico, and I shall just have a play around with getting the bottom tier right, and then in theory the other tiers I can scale down a little bit as I work my way up the panel, because obviously the panel's getting narrower as we go up. At this stage you might not be able to see this very clearly, and there's no actual structure in it yet, but what I've done is I've taken this squarish shape of calico, I've turned it 45 degrees so it is on, 45 degrees so it's on the bias, and then I've pinned it in an arc shape, which you can see on the original costume. That's the shape that they went with, so it's kind of an elliptical shape when it's finished and cut out. And if I kind of hold my hand under it to imitate kind of how the boning will make it stand out once it's got the boning in the bottom channel, it's then going to be cut around this angle here, and then you've got the ruffle tiers will hang down at the bottom in a continuation around the hem. judging it by eye, that's pretty symmetrical. So I'm just going to tidy up those edges just so it's nice and even all the way around, and that's so symmetrical. But yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so I have cut out 4 of the pagoda pieces, these elliptical shapes, 2 different sizes, so the bottom tiers will be slightly bigger and then the top ones are slightly smaller, so they graduate as you go up the dress. So we'll go that way up. You can see I put a channel of the ice blue bias around the bottom edge, and that will encase the boning to give these their support and make them stand out. And then I've overlocked the top edge. You can see I've left it slightly open on one end so I can get the boning in and out. Other than the bottom tier, I'm not going to put the boning in until the very end, just because it's going to be easier to get it under the sewing machine to stitch these pieces on. So I'm going to have to very carefully just press over that top edge, and then I can position this in place on that panel. So the very bottom tier, I have added the ruffle on. So you remember I cut 3 pieces of ruffle out of the width of the fabric that I had. 2 went on the front panel, and this last one has gone on here, which is fine. Let's paint on that. And again, I've used the ice blue bias tape to create the channel for the bottom bone, and that will of course line up with the ruffled hem that goes around on the front panel. So that should all flow nicely all the way around. So yeah, so now I'm just going to press over these edges and start pinning in place. Okay, so that's 4 of these tiers in place and all stitched in. But you might be thinking, well, what's going up here? Because, you know, this is obviously going to have the bustles kind of sit out over here. And when you look at the original costumes in the movie, now I know that I'm not doing this as an exact like replica, I'm just using that as very heavy inspiration. But when you look at the costume in the movie, first of all, the movie costume does have 5 of these tiers, but I'm quite happy with 4 in the interest of time today. But at the top here, there is another boned section, but what it appears to be is, rather than a kind of an elliptical shape like this, it appears to be like a tube attached onto the top top of the skirt on each side, kind of like this. And then there's 3 rows of boning slightly spaced down, and then I think it's lightly gathered, the excess is lightly gathered into the waistband, so it just gives a bit more volume up the top here. So what I have done is worked out, there is 6 inches between each of these, so I've worked out 6 inches from here and then measured to the top, which works out at about 12 inches. I've done it 12.5 just so I've got a little bit extra to turn under if needs be. And I've measured the width, so it is the same width as this top pagoda piece here, so that when it's attached and the bones are in, it shouldn't stick out any further than what is already here. But the 3 bones will give a kind of a slightly broader structure around here, and then the top piece will gather in like ish, that kind of something like that. I'll show you in a little bit more detail when I have finished it. I have put the upper section on, it's just pinned on at the moment. and just gathered in the top and just pinned it in place. And I put these 3 boning channels on. But I'm not sure that I like it. And looking back at the original, I think boning channels are much closer together. And now that I think about it, I think I did exactly the same thing when I first done this cosplay many years ago. So yeah, I might take the top layer off and maybe add another one in the middle there. Not that's all I've got left of it. I don't want to make any more bias binding. Oh, I was doing so well. I've not unpicked anything all day. Slightly annoying. Well, it's after 3 o'clock and I promised my husband I'd stop work at 4 today, so I might have to call this quits. I'm gonna have to try and finish this off in the evenings next week, which is a little bit annoying, but then that serves me right for trying to bite off more than I could chew. I'm trying to please my followers. I always said, make the more complicated one. You know who you are. The camera battery is going to die very shortly. I'm on 4%, so I will have to leave it here. And you unanimously